Good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 p.m. Sunday, April the 7th, and I believe we are live. And this is Patricia King and Quest for Life Foundation, and this is our Quest Connect that we do every month and share with you teachings from the Quest program that we don't have time. We take this time to delve even deeper into all the teachings that we share with people in the Quest for Life Foundation. And I imagine quite a number of you have been to Quest, and this could be a refresher course, and others of you joining us now. Hopefully this may be an introduction to Quest and what the skills and practical skills and helpful framework that we have to offer people who are going through difficult life situations, what we affectionately call the Ds. And D is for difficult, and D is for drama, death, divorce, debt, drought. There's so many Ds that are troublesome. So this is about how to manage those situations in better and more skillful ways. So welcome to everybody who's joining us as we go, and I'm sure there will be many and many of you watching on a replay, so welcome to you all. And let's dive into today's really interesting topic, which is about how to have difficult, actually the word mastering difficult conversations. Okay, sound, thank you, the person who's said the sound is quiet. Hopefully, Di, thank you. If you could let me know if that's better now, that'd be great. So let's start by, as we start everything at Quest, we like to say we start everything by doing nothing, and that is just to bring ourselves, coming to our senses and bringing ourselves into the current moment from all the things that we've been doing today. And so wherever you are in your chair or where you're sitting today, just bringing your awareness now to your feet on the floor or wherever they are, and feeling that connection from your feet, the centers, energy centers in the bottom of your feet to the earth. And you may even feel that electromagnetic connection that is there, we can feel from the earth to the feet, feeling ourselves here. And then taking your awareness to feeling the body, gravity holding your body on your chair or your bed or wherever you are sitting or lying. And just tune in to that sense of the body is being held in place. And how is that for you right now, feeling that sense of the body in time and space. And then we're going to do the practice we call coming to our senses, which is just focusing in the mind on the five senses to bring us back into this present moment. So starting with, and you may have your eyes closed, and so we might start with the sound, the sense of sound. And are there any sounds, as well as my voice, inside your room or your space? And are there any sounds outside of the room in your wider environment? And just tuning into them and noticing your sense of sound in this moment. Are there any aromas in your space that you're aware of? And we've had a lot of wet weather, so some of us have got a bit of a mouldy aroma going on. Just noticing what might be around for you. And then even with eyes closed, is there any sight behind closed eyes, or maybe you're softly gazing, that sense of sight? Any tastes that reminding you of meals you've had or something you've had a drink from? And then the touch, the sense of touch, and maybe like me, you're clasping your hands or your hands are on your lap in some way. And the touch of clothing on our skin, maybe you've got a soft breeze blowing. So that sense of touch, and just noticing how when we tune into those five senses and the body, we come into the present moment and we shift the focus. In fact, we shift the blood flow in the brain to the frontal lobes so that we can be here now in this present moment. And so bringing our awareness to the brain, and I just love to warm up the brain somewhat with bringing your focus to the left side of the brain, to the right side of the brain, and doing that 2 more times from the left to the right, from the left to the right, as we just balance the brain, wake up the brain, and invite the brain to be attentive, to be interested in what we're going to share and talk about this afternoon, I'm used to doing it in the morning. And then focusing ourselves now in this current moment. So thank you for that, and noticing the breath, and just taking a deep breath as we come into our time together now, where we're talking about mastering difficult conversations with compassion and empathy. What a big topic, and we could do a whole week on this, so trying to make this as practical and helpful as we can today. So let's talk about first what makes a conversation difficult, and why might we anticipate a conversation is going to be difficult. And you may not have thought about this, and you might have a lot of, oh, it's because of this, that, and the other thing, but really it boils down to a difficult conversation is one where we anticipate that both people are going to have big feelings. And it's usually not the big happy feelings that make a conversation difficult. That's usually an excited, I can't wait to tell you conversation. It's more that we're aware that there's going to be big difficult feelings that are going to make the conversation feel awkward, uncomfortable, scary, difficult. So that's something to be aware of, because we don't know sometimes how the other person's going to, what feelings they're going to have, and sometimes we don't know what feelings we're going to have when we raise a difficult subject. Now let's give some examples of that, because at Crest we are with people who have had traumas, who've had a diagnosis, who've had a traumatic event in their life. And so often the conversations are about situations, circumstances that give rise to big feelings, and the two most difficult feelings that come up that make conversations difficult are anger and fear. So we anticipate a difficult conversation when we think we're going to be afraid, or the other person's going to be afraid, or that somebody might get angry, or we might get angry, or we don't know what's going to happen. And that's what can make us nervous and anxious about having a conversation. But when we're dealing with extreme circumstances or difficult circumstances, there are frequently difficult conversations involved. And so it is really worth our time this afternoon to just put our heads together and look at what some of those difficulties are, and how we might be able to help ourselves come to those conversations better prepared and more realistic about what conversations are worth having and what might be achieved. Because I think that's mastery. When we choose, you might have heard that expression, we choose our battles, we choose our conversations, and we choose who we're going to have them with. So that's one of the things to think about in a conversation is the person you're having the conversation with someone you know well, or is it with a stranger? Because that makes a huge difference. Say you're having a difficult conversation at work with a boss or a co-worker. You know them in one context, you don't really know perhaps their emotional world, you don't know their personal interaction style, so you don't know how they're going to react if you're giving them feedback, or they're giving you feedback, or a conflict needs to be worked through to get a work task done. Then often we're surprised. We don't know how people are going to behave in these situations where there are differences. But with people that we know and people that we live with and are related to, I'm often amazed at how often people still behave as if they don't know who they're talking to or how this person is going to react to the topic. So I want to pause here for a moment and talk about, as a side note, but a very important precursor, And if you've been to Quest, know that we really make a point of talking about the difference between having a reaction and having a response. And I'll just quickly demonstrate that with, in our language, we often use the two words as if they're the same, a reaction and a response. But at Quest, we really make the point that we don't ever say to someone, I just wish you'd be more reactive. We don't say that, because we actually know that when people and ourselves, when we're all reactive, things are way more difficult because we're reacting than when we're response able, which means we're able to respond and think about what would be a useful response to this conversation, this circumstance. We've got time to respond. We've got the ability to respond. So we're response able. When we're reactive or we're reacting, it's spur of the moment, it's half the blink of an eye, it's automatic pilot, and we are always reacting out of a past experience. So sometimes it's a, if it's a physical danger, we react quickly. We want our first responders. They're trained in how to be great reactors, to react fast, make fast decisions, engage with people in danger. We love that they've got those fast, useful, reactive skills. The rest of us, not so much. When we're reacting or we're reactive, it often doesn't go so well, because we might have a reactive styles like, that's it, I'm out of here, or you always do this to me, or we shut down. We go engage in the fight, flight, or freeze of the trauma reactive. That's often how they're commonly identified. So when we have a conversation in which we anticipate a person might become reactive, and we anticipate that I will become reactive, it really can be useful to give that conversation, if at all possible, some thought. Now, sometimes there isn't the time, there isn't the moment arises, the situation happens, and we need to react. And sometimes we have built up to these difficult conversations over time because we've got some news we need to share or some feelings we know that we need to communicate in a situation. And what comes to mind there, where there's a series of these conversations often, is if somebody has a life-threatening diagnosis and there is a journey to go on with a family, and everybody is upset and reactive, and there's many conversations though that have to happen about how do we meet the needs of this person, how do we support each other, how do we help each other in this sad, difficult situation that we're faced with. And that's where often in that journey is where we're really paying attention. But in all our trauma journeys, our depression journeys, all the different journeys we share together at Quest for Life, these conversations can be very, very crucial. So what, you might ask, can we do about that? And before we talk about that reaction, let's just pause for a moment and acknowledge the fact that all any of us really, really want is to love people, to be loved, to be heard and understood. And sometimes we focus more on that, I need to be heard and understood, and perhaps don't give quite as much energy to, and I need to hear and understand the other people in my life, my loved ones, or the people I'm going to be dealing with. That hearing and understanding really needs to be a two-way street. And that's something we can know in advance about the people we're married to, the children we raised, the parents we grew up with, the siblings we have. We've had a lot of time with those people to observe how they do under pressure. How do they react? How capable are they of talking about feelings? How willing are they to listen and understand? Or is there a conversation interaction style in our family where we react, and maybe we react with judgment or shut down, or you shouldn't say that, or blame and shame? And it's very useful to give some thought to this if you're anticipating difficult conversations in your family or in your relationship. It surprises me sometimes that people race in with I just expected that person to give me support or give me understanding. And when I say to them, so what's that been like in other situations? Are they able to do that? Go, oh, well, no. It's like expecting someone to show up differently because there's a crisis is not very realistic. People usually often show up more reactively in a crisis than they do when they're given fair warning. Here's a great definition I heard not so long ago about a reasonable expectation. We might say, well, it's reasonable, I'm the one with the diagnosis, or I'm the one, it's reasonable to expect that person to listen to me and support me, and go, it is reasonable if you've seen that person be able to listen and support someone empathically in the past. If you've known that person, parent all your life, or sibling all your life, or partner for 20 years, and now that you think about it, it's not actually in their skill set to be a great empathic listener, you may want to pause for a minute before putting that expectation into the relationship, because it may not be realistic. So often I find that the difficult conversations that go south, become unhelpful, are where people haven't realistically looked at, I know he's not good at talking about feelings. I know mum will get overwhelmed with worry and just fill the space with her worries. I know my sister will fly off the handle, whatever right? Let's put that into the mix. If we're going to master difficult conversations, we need to be skillful about who am I talking to, what am I talking to them about. Many people work off a template of it's about who's right or who's wrong, it's about doing the right thing, it's about good and bad. And that's not a useful template when we're dealing with a conversation where there's going to be a lot of emotion. In case you haven't noticed yet, feelings aren't that interested in who's right or who's wrong. Feelings are spontaneous and they come out of our history, always, 100% of the time. They're not new. They don't come out of nowhere. That feeling of nobody's listening to me, nobody's there for me, I can't rely on anybody, why do I bother? Those kind of scenarios that can be running in our brain in the middle of a conversation, this is out of our history. This is not something we've made up in the moment. So of course, the most important person I bring to a difficult conversation is myself. And acknowledging that I want to have this conversation because I want to be closer to this person. I want to share with them what's happening for me, or I want to find out from them what's happening for them. I want to support them. I want to be supported. Maybe at work I want to say that I'm not getting what I need. I'm not happy with the situation, or something's not making sense to me that is pretty important. There can be many reasons. But before we launch in, it's important for mastery to say, so what do I want in this conversation? I want to be heard. I want to be, have something open. Conversations that are great and change things, where water can be shed, air can be cleared, ground can be shifted, things can be moved onto different fitting, good talk, as they say. I love that expression, good talk, right? Is where we've been able to engage. And I've been able to hear you, you've been able to hear me. Nobody's gone into a reactive meltdown. We've been able to stay with it, try and see the point. Now, I just want to point out to you that as I describe those responses, they're all adult responses. So our adult self knows that we need to be in executive function to have difficult conversations. We need to be thinking about what's the best outcome? How can I say this most clearly? How can I listen to you the best that I'm able? How can I say clearly what I want and I need? And so they're very adult, grown-up thoughts. Sometimes people come to difficult conversations loaded with emotion, and when we just unpack them a bit, there's a lot of childhood emotion. I just want you to see me. You never listen to me. I'm so hurt. you did this thing or that thing and I'm wounded, I'm hurt, which is usually coming from a place of childhood wounding that keeps echoing in our adult life. So one of the best things we can do to prepare for a difficult conversation is to check in with ourselves and say, hey, have I got a younger part of me here who's just really got a load of emotion on because I want something from that person. So this is the conversation you find yourself having in the shower, in the car, and then I'm going to say, and I'm going to tell, and I'll point out, and then I'll get them to know, and then I'll say, we're practicing it, and we're going over it, and we're going to make that point, and we've got a bit of a, we've got a load on board. And when we come to a difficult conversation with that, I've got to talk to you, we've got to talk, and they make fun of it in movies now with good cause. We need to talk. It's like, oh, that's never good, because it never is, right? Because we need to talk in a joyous, loving, and comfortable way. Never doesn't usually come with a we need to talk message, right? So when we get a we need to talk, there's trouble brewing, right? And that means there's feelings that have been stewing and brewing away, and now they're going to come out quite possibly, potentially, with a lot of force behind them and a lot of energy behind them, because I've been waiting to say this to you. And maybe I have a lifetime of not feeling heard or taken seriously by others. And often this is what people bring into their marriages, Finally, you say you love me, therefore you should be able to receive my emotional world. And sometimes that's just not true. That person just doesn't have that skill set. Doesn't mean they don't love you. Doesn't mean they're not willing to try necessarily, but it's a good thing to check that out. Loving someone, in many ways, I would define when you love someone, you're interested in how they feel. It's one of a definition for me of loving behaviour is, I do care how you feel. I do care if I've upset you. I do care if you've upset me. I do care if we've both upset somebody else. Like, I care about that. I care if you're having a bad day. I'm not going to judge you, try to fix you, shut you down, shame you or blame you for any of that. I am willing to listen. That's loving behaviour. But we know many of our families do not have that skill set. And in fact, what they have is shut this down, don't let it go any further, you shouldn't feel that way, now I'm worried about you, why would you do that, why would you think that? A whole bunch of really unhelpful reactions. So it's so worth noticing, if you grew up in a family that did that, that will be your automatic pilot. And your automatic pilot isn't necessarily your best strategy in having a difficult conversation. So I hear you crying, what will I do about that? How can that happen? What will I do? Well, it's really a great idea to learn some skills and practice some stuff to get better at it. We can never say, I know everything there is to know about that, certainly when it comes to relationships with our dear fellow human beings. And we never can say, I know all about myself and how I'm going to react. I'm 71 and still surprising myself regularly with my reactions. Where did that come from? How did that just come out of my mouth? That's the joy of being human. We're spontaneous, we evolve, we grow, we change, and we can devolve and stay stuck as well. So we do need to be willing to be self-aware, especially in a difficult conversation. This person may say things that surprise me, and they may say things that surprise me about me, and I may not like them. Am I up for that? Am I willing to be open for that? Am I willing to be open to listening? So one of the best ways I believe that we can prepare is to talk to someone who we know is a good listener. Now, that you may be blessed to have a friend like that in your life, someone in a community that you belong to, or someone you've observed is great at this stuff. Or it may be that you go to a counsellor or a conflict resolution workshop, or, there's lots of things to try to say, I probably need to learn some things here and maybe practice saying this conversation. If you don't have access to those resources, maybe you write down the thing you're burning, you've got a load on. I want to tell this person how unreasonable and wrong and terrible they've been. And sometimes that's just where we're at, right? So write it out, write it down, let yourself go for it. Use the bad language, blame, put in all the judgment, all the stuff that was not going to be helpful for you to say out loud, but will be helpful for you to get out of your system, and see how that shifts you. Because the best way we can master a difficult conversation is to be aware of what we're bringing and be very aware of how we're choosing to express ourselves, and that we are choosing. We're not just blurting and dumping. So a lot of people going, I just have to tell them the truth, and it's better to get it all out, and in a relationship we should have no secrets, and we've got to share everything. And I go, do we though? Because sometimes these sharings, and often people are telling the other person something because they feel guilty or they feel embarrassed or ashamed, and they want to kind of get it out and put it on the other person. Well, that really doesn't help, right? I did this thing, or I should tell you. Personally, I think it's okay to have boundaries in relationships and say, there's some things I'm not going to share because I'm not that person anymore. And the pain it would cause me, the pain it would cause the other person may not be useful. I'd rather be sharing my love and my truth about things that are relevant to us right now. And there's no shoulds here. I'm just saying there are choices to be made, right? But it's not always, and I get frustrated when I hear of, counsellors say, have you told your husband about this? Your husband might be just not the person to be talking to about this. The idea that sharing it with the other partner is going to unlock something is often ill-informed, in my opinion, because if that other partner doesn't have the skill to hear what you're saying, I don't feel loved, I don't feel, well, let's unpack that a bit. Let's unpack my history about feeling loved before I come to you with my complaints about your behaviour, right? Because there's more to unpack. And one of the things about unpacking our reactions out of our past is that often we're having conversations with people in the present that really we needed to have with, and couldn't have, with people in the past, right? And so we're actually screaming at our father, you never listened to me. We're actually saying to my mother, stop worrying about me, stop telling me what to do. But in fact, there's our partner there going, I don't quite understand how we got here, right? Because actually, most people will bring their unexpressed emotions from their family of origin into their marriage and go, great, here's a container, let me drop those here and let's see what you do with them. That would be a great idea if we didn't unerringly be drawn towards people who reflect our family of origin. So, that's why our divorce rate is very high, because if people aren't willing to unpack where all this stuff came from, we are going to repeat unskillful patterns in our relationships. And it's fabulous when you can break that pattern. So again, I'm going to come back to how do we break that pattern? And the key to breaking our old patterns of behavior is always self-awareness. Always. And if you're having a conversation with somebody who isn't interested in their own self-awareness, that can be difficult, because it works best, of course, the best way to have a healthy, vibrant, growthful conversation, even if it's about, I've just found out I'm dying of an illness, or I've just found out that we've lost all our money, or I've just found out I've just lost my job, or something dreadful in the environment. If we can both be loving, self-aware, open and aware of our reactions, we can really grow through those experiences together. But what more, if you want to be normal, which I don't suggest, but what normally happens is what we discover is the fear and the anxiety that get engendered in us both in those circumstances catapult us into old patterns of behaviour, which are often, this must be somebody's fault, what did you do wrong, how can this be, what are we going to do now, over quickly, I want to go into action, I want to fix this, I want to fix you, I want to stop you having the feelings you're feeling because they scare me and I don't know what to do with them. I think you're criticising me and I can't take that, so I'm out of here. Sure, you're familiar with some of these patterns. So one of Patria's wonderful inventions, of which there are quite a few, is a great little formula that we suggest people use for difficult conversations. And it's 4 statements. The first one is, I notice. The next one is, I imagine. And the third one is, I feel. And the fourth one is, I need. So you might want to write those down. If you've been to Quest, you'll have them written in a book somewhere, and they are on our website, right? So the first one is warming up to, why are we thinking I'm having a difficult conversation? I've noticed something. Now, it may be I've been to the doctor and I've got some bad news and I've noticed I'm scared out of my wits and I don't want to be this on my own, so I'm noticing a lot right now. And if we can just, or it may be you keep doing behaviours that irritate me and now I'm looking for them and I'm focusing on them and I can't stop thinking about them. You know that one. It might be, I notice you always walk away when, many things, right? I notice at work you never finish your work. I notice you never do your homework, whatever. Many things we can notice. And so that's a useful way to start, which is, hey, I notice, not, hey, you always. So any conversation that begins with you always is doomed to fail. Let's just get that on the table right now. That's never going to work, right? We come to people with, I've got a bone to pick with you. I've got a judgment to communicate to you, right? Here's my judgment. I've got a blame to lay on you. I've got a shame to lay on you. Yeah, it'll be a difficult conversation, but it will not be useful. I've got a hurt to lay at your door. It will not be useful. We need to come to a conversation with, hey, I've noticed. The other day I really wanted to share with you my upset at this, and you got up and went to the kitchen and you made me a cup of tea, but I noticed we didn't actually get to have the conversation, right? So a noticing doesn't have judgment, doesn't have blame, doesn't have shame. It's just a noticing of the behaviour without interpretation. I notice that you think I'm like your mother and that I always do this to you, but I'm not like your mother. And if we do not want to go into Freudian analysis of our partners or our friends, right? It's not our business to get inside their heads. I notice you always avoid a topic where right? Best to avoid that. Just, I notice the conversation shifts. But that can often require great restraint on our part, because what we want to do is get stuck in or have a conversation. Thank you, Candice, for posting that there. Very, very helpful. Thank you. In the comments, Candice has posted where this is on the Quest website. Thank you. So then after I've noticed something, then most people want to, I'm going to tell you how it is, and then you better say something helpful, or you better react or say you're sorry, or we often have an agenda to, I'm telling you this so you can show up like this. I want to have this conversation. Basically, often it's because I want to feel better. I'm upset, I'm hurt, I'm angry, I'm obsessing about your behavior, I'm scared. So I'm coming to you to say, hey, here's a conversation, I want you to do something to make me feel better. And often we're very disappointed when the person, that's not what happens. They react, they get a shock or a surprise, they go into blame and judgment, and then we all feel worse. And that's why we get scared of having difficult conversations. I'm sure if we're in a room together now, you could go, and if we did a who's had the experience of, more than once of having a difficult conversation and it's turned out worse. And I think we'd all go, yeah, I've had that conversation and I've lost relationships and I've ruptured relationships and I haven't known how to fix them, and I've lost friends, or I've lost marriages, I've lost connection with family members. So I'm imagining we've all been there and we've been hurt by that, we've been wounded by that. And so we do need to learn the skills. Often what we spend our time is ruminating about what the other person didn't come up with, and that is never useful because we can't change what they're going to do. But what we can look at is not whose fault it is, where did it go wrong. It's like, what was I expecting and how was I reacting? And I wonder if there's anything there I can do differently. If I'm going to have another go at it, the only person I can bring to the table differently is me. It reminds me of people say, now I want to talk to you about this and I don't want you to get upset. How effective is that? Not, right? It's like the minute I say that, you're like, okay, I'm already feeling upset because you don't want me to get upset, right? We can't control other people's reactions. So very, very key to this little formula that we share at Quest is, after I've noticed, which is I've kind of put the agenda on the table, this is what we're talking about. I've noticed that, you're uncomfortable talking about my diagnosis or my treatment or my child's disability or my finances, whatever it is, right? Notice that. The next thing I do is imagine, this is really important, imagine how it is for you. And that is where this formula is radical, because mostly it's about lay out clearly what you need and then kind of say to the other person, okay, you show up now, do something with that. Whereas this formula, which I think is a great door conversation opener, says the next thing you do after you put out what you're noticing, what's of concern to you, what you want to discuss, the next thing you say is, and I imagine that this is very confronting, confusing, unpleasant for you, distracting for you, because I've actually sat and thought about, why would that person do that? Now I know that sounds contradictory to don't psychoanalyze them, and it's not about, oh, that's because their mother always, or they, but it might be as simple as, I know you're sensitive to loud noises, and when I raise my voice when I get upset, and I see you have a reaction to that. It may be that I notice that me having a tidy house it's more important to me having a tidy house, and that it doesn't seem to bother you at all, which I can't understand, and I do have judgment about, but I'm not here to share that judgment with you. I'm just saying, I imagine it's just not on your radar, which is not something I can easily relate to, but I'm imagining how that is for you. Now you see, we've got to pay attention to not putting the judgment in here. I imagine for you this is way down on your priority list, or it's not a comfortable conversation to have. In a marriage you might say, I do know your family and I know this is probably a very uncomfortable topic for you because I know how your family would deal with this, but I'm wondering if we can have a go at discussing it differently. The way we achieve mastery here is to be the ones who can stay non-reactive for as long as possible. Right? That's our job. If we are fronting the conversation, it's like, okay, for me to have the best outcome for all of us from this conversation, the longer I can stay non-reactive, the better this can go. Right? And the more room and space I can allow for that person maybe to surprise me. Have you ever had the experience of gearing up for a difficult conversation and finding that when you were able to hear the other person's point of view and they were able to express it and you were able to express it, that the air did clear, you did feel closer, You do feel like you know each other better. I mean, that's yay, that's the outcome we want. And so we really want to pay attention to, yeah, what did I do there that really worked? And one of the things usually is I was able to speak and stay non-reactive. So you see that this is assuming a skill level, because some people literally can't talk about how they feel. They don't have any feeling words in their vocabulary. And I've trained counsellors for decades. And if you've got a person who just go, oh, that was good, oh, that's bad, oh, yeah, that's good, oh, that went well, that was good, that was bad, you can't have a conversation about difficult feelings with somebody who doesn't have a feeling vocabulary. Oh, I've been diagnosed with cancer, oh, that's bad. What are you going to do about it? You're going to get chemo, that'll be good. Oh, well, let's see if the chemo works. Oh, it didn't work, that's bad. Oh, it's worked now, that's good. It's not adequate to cope with the magnitude of that conversation, right? So one of the things sometimes we do and need to be aware of is if you're having a conversation with your dear husband or father, and it is usually the males who don't have the great feeling vocab because it's in the culture. Men are not required to talk about feelings at all. It's not part of the masculine scenario. Talking Australian, mainly Anglo-Saxon derived culture norms here. Talking about feelings is not usually on the agenda. So there are many older men particularly who just don't have a word to say. Oh, that's no good. Oh, well, to find a way to make that better. Right, that's what they got, right? So it's no good trying to have a conversation about difficult feelings with somebody who can't actually articulate feelings, who can't say, I feel sad, I feel scared. You've had a diagnosis, you're unwell. Oh my goodness, that's so scary for me. Oh, that scares the life out of me. And I might be able to say, I don't want to lose you, but under there's like so much fear, or I'm so angry that this would happen, or whatever, right? But if we can't even name those feelings, some of our new brain researchers would say, and the counselling world, we've been saying it for years, you've got to name it, name the feeling to tame it. It's quite a nifty little thing. If we can't speak the feeling, we don't know what the feeling is, we're not going to be able to tease it out and disperse it and have it morph into another feeling, right? And many people, older people, are of the view that what's the point in talking about anything? It doesn't change anything. Well, here is the answer to that old chestnut. It's like, actually, it does change something. It changes the brain. And we now have very clear evidence that when we talk about the feelings cause neurons to fire in the brain, and they cause chemistry to be elicited in the brain, and cause us to become a cycle of I'm scared, and now I'm thinking scary thoughts, and now I feel worse, and now I'm building up to a panic attack. It's a cycle in the brain. Talking can't remove the thing that's scaring you, but it can shift the blood flow in the brain, because now you're going, oh, I'm communicating my fear to another person. They're communicating something back to me that has a definite impact on the brain. If they're not going, oh my God, yes, me too. If they're not raising the ante into the drama, or they're not highly reactive, but they're actually have a calming presence, or they can just listen to me, it has a huge impact on the brain. So talking about difficult feelings, talking about difficult situations does change things. It changes the amount of feeling we have about them. It changes the way we feel about them if we have an empathic, non-reactive listener. And that's what counselling is all about. It's not that counsellors or therapists have the answer to your problems. They have the skills to listen in a way that will help your brain calm down enough to find its own answers. And hopefully they have information to contribute about what could be a useful way to think about this, what could be a different way to talk about this. They can teach you skills and information that you are missing, because when you think about it, you go, my family of origin doesn't have those skills. And I don't think I ever learnt them unless I went somewhere to learn them, or I hung out with highly skilled people to learn how they communicate. I will not have those skills. It's not who I am. It's not who they are. It's actually about learned skills. So, sorry, I'm reading Glenn's comment. I'm glad I made you laugh, Glenn. Very good. So, mastery is taking all these things into account, and this very, very key component, which is after I notice to you what's going on, what I'm concerned about, that I take the trouble and imagine how this might feel for you. And of course, one of the key things here is that I have the capacity for some insight, because if you're having a conversation and somebody says, I can't imagine why you did that, I can't imagine why you feel that way, you shouldn't feel that way. If we're talking with someone who has no imagination about how we might feel or why we might have done something, it's hard to open the door into growth for that conversation. Whereas we're having a conversation with someone who goes, hold on a minute, let me take a moment. And this is where the empathy comes in, to imagine what that might have been like for you. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have to feel it. Empathy is not walking a mile in the other person's shoes. I don't have to feel what you're feeling, but I do need to be able to imagine, at least imagine, that must have been really hard. That must have been really scary. Oh, I can see why you're upset about that. Oh, I imagine it's hard to think of what to do next. Oh, I wouldn't like to have had to deal with that. I imagine you don't know what to say, right? The use of our imagination. So once again, awareness. If you're talking to a family member, you might want to just pause and go, have I ever heard this person use their imagination? Because there's a lot of older people that you will know who you won't have heard them ever use their imagination. Oh, it's just your imagination. So that person isn't going to be great at imagining how this feels for you. You know, can an older person imagine what it's like to be a younger person in the different world that our kids and grandkids are growing up in? We've got to use our imagination, because it wasn't like that in our day. Just as we would love them to use their imagination to know what it might be like for us to be older and not have had those experiences. Imagination is a great gift and talent, and brings a lot to difficult conversations. Let me take a moment to imagine what this is like for you. And when we can do that, it reduces people's reactivity so immediately and strongly. Why? Because when I take the trouble to say, I'm just imagining what that might be like for you, you will feel seen and heard and understood, even if I get it wrong. Right? So sometimes you go, oh, imagine that must have taken so much courage. And the person might go, no, I didn't feel brave. I felt stupid. And I go, yeah, but you did it anyway. It doesn't mean if I get it wrong, we don't have to get caught up in was that wrong or right. It doesn't matter. The fact that I imagined that you might have felt that way or anyway means so much to people. You took a moment and imagined what this was like for me. This is when we feel loved. You know, people often chasing this. You might feel loved when you get red roses or you get a nice card, but sometimes, or a big ring, you might feel loved, you might not. Some people go, I should be feeling loved and amazing because I got all this stuff. But I can guarantee you, from over 40 years of working with people, when you will feel most loved is when somebody says, I imagine that must have been really tough for you. That is when we feel loved. You took a minute to look into my world, to imagine my world, and to express that to me. That is love. And honestly, that is the single greatest ingredient. And this is not just my opinion. This is a researched thing now, right? And it's what we train counsellors to do, to empathically reflect and imagine, because it opens the heart. It opens the floodgates of, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel connected. And now we can have a very difficult conversation. So that if I am dying of cancer, or I have gotten clear that I need to leave you, or we have just lost all our money, or I don't know what else, our child has died, terrible things happen in people's lives. We can support each other with that. We can take a moment to imagine how this feels for each other, for each other. You know, 70% of marriages don't survive the death of a child. And really it is about this capacity to be able to tolerate and imagine the other person's grief in the middle of your own grief, which is a huge ask. That's a big ask of any relationship. But it requires a lot of insight and skill to notice and imagine that that other person is grieving differently to me, and that's their way of doing it. There's no right or wrong. And can we share across that gap? You know, difficult conversations can be where we fall more deeply in love with our beloved, with ourselves, with our family, with our friends, with complete strangers. If we have an amazing conversation, and this is what moves us to tears often in movies and moments, that movies with good scripts that show people showing up and being insightful and being empathic. We are moved by those. We're moved to tears because it's what we all want so much, is to have a difficult conversation that works, a conversation about the difficult feelings and circumstances of being human. It's not an easy gig. It's not enough to say to our kids, I just want you to be happy. There's too much going on. I just want you to be able to respond to life with your heart open. I want you to have warm, loving, meaningful relationships where you can connect with people, and that may or may not be in circumstances that are happy. So mastery of these difficult conversations is, I notice this is going on. I notice we're not talking at the moment, and the air feels tense because we're so full of feelings. And for me, I feel afraid to even broach the subject. And I imagine for you, maybe you're feeling impatient with me, or mad about what's happened, or scared as I am, I don't know. Can we talk about that, right? So I notice, I imagine, I feel scared, angry, sad, lost, lonely, frightened, overwhelmed. Can we talk about that? If we have a conversation about who's doing it the right way or the wrong way, nah. If we have a conversation about you should be doing it the way I think everybody should do it, nah. If we have a conversation about you should be ashamed of yourself and you should know better, yeah, right? They're not great conversations. So we need to be very aware of what we're bringing to the table. And so I notice, I imagine, I feel, and then I need, because, you know, I need some time with you, or I need some time alone. I need some support with this. I need to ring that doctor and I'm too scared. Can you help me? I need help with getting through the day. I need help with the housework. What do I need? And it's not I'm bringing this need for you to meet necessarily, but me articulating my needs can be really useful. So say, oh, I didn't know you needed that. You always look like you're so in charge, or you look like you've got that all together, or I didn't even know that was important to you. The more we can share how we feel, what's important, the more we can open those relationships. Conflict resolution people who study this say is about competing needs. I need this and you need that. And we haven't been able to find a way to get both sets of needs met, or one party says your needs aren't valid, or your needs are wrong, or you shouldn't have them, or my needs are more important. But it's always about both our needs can't be met, right? Whereas in conflict resolution and other approaches, we find our needs can be met if we can come to the table with openness and without blame and shame and judgment. You shouldn't have done that in the first place. If you hadn't have done that, we wouldn't be here now. That may be true, but if we keep saying that, we're not going to move forward. So it should be, I really wish you hadn't done that, or I hadn't done that, or we hadn't ended up here, and here we are. So how can we share that now in a way that serves both of us? And I've got my hand on my heart because what I know is key to the mastery, and I've said it, but I'll say it again, is about lowering my reactivity, opening my brain, being willing to share insight from my adult self. And sometimes it is about, there's a little girl in me who just wants you to put your arms around her and tell her you love her. And that would probably get rid of everything. And then there's a grown-up in me who says, and I still need the dishes washed, right? We can play with this together. In a relationship, we need to know the story of our other half's inner child, the childhood experience, because it will be playing out in our relationship all the time. The more insight, love and compassion we can have about both of those, the more we can play with this together and anticipate our reactivity. Now, I know you're going to react to this, so I'm going to work around with that. Or we're not going to have that conversation now because it's going to be really reactive. This idea of don't go to bed with your anger. It's like, yeah, sometimes go to bed. Not with the anger, don't stew on it, but go, we're tired. I'm fond of saying no conversation had after midnight is really a useful conversation. Definitely no conversation you've had after 2 alcoholic drinks is not a useful conversation. People go, oh, we were up all night talking. I go, that probably wasn't useful. And we drank a bottle of wine, that probably wasn't useful either, right? You can't drive a car after 2 glasses of wine. You shouldn't be having a difficult conversation after 2 glasses of wine. Alcohol-fueled, long night unloadings of emotional content doesn't actually build relationship, and it doesn't actually build skill. Sometimes just gives ammunition for more defensiveness next time. So there's a lot to unpack, as you can hear. I hope some of this practically has been useful for you. And probably like most things, the answers always really are going to lie within my self-awareness, my ability to take responsibility to function as an adult is going to be the most important thing in my difficult conversations. My ability to use my imagination about what this is like for you is going to give me that compassion and empathy that makes all the difference. So compassion I've heard described as wisdom, wisdom and understanding with love. And so when we ask that question, I imagine it feels like this for you. That is the doorway to compassion. And I feel compassion for that. I imagine, this has been upsetting and painful for you, and I can have compassion for you in the middle of whatever I'm needing to talk about. Now that's not, I need to take care of your feelings, I need to make it better. I just have compassion for both of us. Wisdom and understanding with love to say, yeah, this is tough. Any couple dealing with a diagnosis, it's a tough voyage for both parties, and a lot of compassion and empathy and wisdom and patience. Parents dealing with a child's diagnosis of a disability, a lot of patience and wisdom and understanding is needed. This is going to be a lifelong, difficult journey, whether it's an end-of-life journey or a beginning-of-life journey. No room for blame and shame. So compassion and empathy are definitely the way forward, and using the skills and our little formula is a great start. I want to leave you with a humorous description of this. We often talk about this little formula, which is a friend of ours practiced with her dog, and she said, I noticed you haven't been eating that very expensive new dog food I bought you. And I imagine it's because you don't like the taste of it. But I feel angry because it really cost me a fortune and I need to find a way to change this situation, and I'm going to have to do it because I'm the dog owner. So that's just a fun example of practicing with people who won't answer back. And, you know, it is about practice. We want to practice compassion, practice empathy, and of course, you know, I was going to say practice it with yourself first. I hope this has been helpful today. That hour went very quickly for me. Thank you for your feedback in the comments. And I hope it did resonate, some of you, all of it, some of it, all of it, and just got you thinking about those difficult conversations because they are important and we want to make them so worthwhile. So have a beautiful rest of your Sunday afternoon and go forth with wisdom, love and compassion for yourself. And we will see you again next time at Quest Connect. Thanks, everybody.